The Executive and the Mystic podcast, co-hosted by Fred LeFranc and Kristina Wiltsee, where wisdom meets business.
Hi, I'm Fred, and I'm the executive.
And I am Kristina, and I am the mystic. Welcome to the Executive and the Mystic podcast, where wisdom meets business. I would first, before we jump into today's episode on forgiveness, love to introduce my co-host, Fred LeFranc, who is a chaos strategist who works with not just restaurants, with all over the industry, helping people to lead culture in a different way and really embody a more healthy and restorative way of running business in his life, as well as with all the people he works with. So welcome, Fred.
Oh, thank you. And I want to introduce Kristina Wiltsee, my co-host, who as a prospective alchemist, I know firsthand has really helped people reach great epiphanies and understandings of their circumstance, because she's able to help them see things in a very, very different way. And I just had an experience this weekend where someone shared that, and it's just really beautiful to know that one person can make a ripple in someone else's life, and it just extends beyond theirs. So welcome, Kristina.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Fred. Before we get into today's episode, again, I would like everybody to like, subscribe, and if you can leave us a review anywhere it is, even if it's just a, hey, I liked this episode, or if you want to give us 5 stars, if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're on Spotify, you follow us, and you can do all sorts of things that helps people find us, and it helps us get into the algorithm. So thank you so much for doing that.
Or forward it to a friend. That'd be good.
Amazing. So many things that's possible. So today, Fred, we're going to be talking about forgiveness, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And it's a big topic for a lot of reasons.
It is, because one of the things that I say is we talk a lot about the ABCs at here at the Executive and the Mystic. And one of the things that we talk about is B, which is balance. And B is about embracing paradox. It's about helping deal with conflict. It's about what practices you're putting into your life. And to me, there is truly no other practice like forgiveness that is able to repair and put me back into a space where I am functional again. Right. One of the ways that I've heard forgiveness described as when you withhold forgiveness, you are putting a long-term tax on your performance, right? That because you are keeping your CPU tied up, right, with something that is you're able to let go. And forgiveness is one of the best practices for doing that.
Yeah. And the thing we talk about forgiveness, a lot of times when we have something occur to us that we feel slighted, or someone did something to us, and we lock that emotion inside of us. And the forgiveness ultimately is a release of that emotion. There's that old saying that if it's like drinking poison and thinking it's going to kill the other person, it only hurts you. So bitterness is the flip side of forgiveness. You just hang on to something. You're clenching onto something because you're angry, you're hurt. Really, it's really hurt because of some action you perceived the other person intended. You may not know that that's what they intended, but you perceive that that intention was there. And this forgiveness is a great practice to release that energy that's sort of stored within. And it'll prevent a heart attack, for God's sakes. Some people can really hang on to things. And we want to talk about forgiveness as an act. And Kristina, explain, that forgiveness does not mean that you've accepted what the other person did to you was okay. It's something else altogether. What is that?
Absolutely. What I would say is that forgiveness, when we're taught forgiveness as a concept as kids or when we're younger, we're taught one of two things. One is there's a heavy religious connotation to forgiveness practices, because especially if you're Christian and you've studied the New Testament at all, like there's a lot of forgiveness practices that are in there, which is, I would say, one of the best parts of that. But you don't have to be religious to be able to apply forgiveness to your life. The other way is you may hear forgive and forget. And in that context, forgive and forget, it's very much put into this place of forgiveness is a practice that makes it so that you can be okay with somebody else who's harmed you, right? And like you're kind of getting them off the hook, or you're making it so that they're moving. But forgiveness is a deeply and wonderfully selfish practice. It is holy, as Fred says, it's holy to stop drinking the poison of your own stuck energy in order to be able to truly incorporate peace into your own existence. Like the other people around you may benefit from being forgiven, but that's not the goal. The goal is for what you feel as a result of forgiving and what you're able to release as a result of that.
Yeah, and forgiveness, like I said earlier, does not mean that you've embraced what someone did to you. There was a great quote. I think it was Nietzsche who said, I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm just sad that I can never trust you again." You're looking at things pretty openly. The relationship will change, and you can forgive someone for doing something, but it doesn't mean you just have to accept them in the totality of it as innocent. It's doing it in a very different way. And I was reminded that, we as humans, we just absorb blame for so many different things. And that's part of it. So when I said the perception that someone intended to do something to you, sometimes is what gets you in this weird spot. So forgiveness could be just an act of realizing that no one intended to do anything. They just where they were. It's like a snake. If a snake bites it, that's what snakes do. What are you going to do? Be mad at the snake? It just did what its snakeness nature had. And people do that as well. And I'm reminded, my father left when I was 6 months old. And as a child, I thought it was because of me. It wasn't logical, but emotion is not logical. And I met my father eventually, and I didn't necessarily care for him because of what he did as a father, but I had to resolve the fact that I was willing to forgive him. I wasn't going to hang on to that anymore and blame him for, what it was like to go out to father and son's outings and have to borrow a dad. All those weird things that you go through as a child. But I was able to forgive him as a man so that I could be a better father to my children and not have a burden and a legacy burden of what the example that he set for me. And as weird as that is, and I was able to do so. And it wasn't because I went to him and said, "Gee, Dad, I forgive you for being a bad father." I just forgave him and let the feeling of that angst go. That was where the forgiveness was. And I think maybe, Kristina, you can help people understand what that process is like and what actually maybe happens from a physical standpoint, an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, the karmic obligation of that people experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really key aspect of this, because one of the things that I teach and what I do so much is, what is the place that you're doing this from? Like, what is the ground you're standing on when you choose to do something like forgiveness? And as Fred said, it's not about approval. It's not even really about reconciliation. It's not about suddenly becoming like convincing yourself to be okay with the actions of another person, right? Like, I know I've talked with many people who used to use forgiveness as in a more toxic way of basically being like, well, I don't really like what you're doing, but instead of confronting you about it, I'm just going to forgive you, right? As opposed to like having any substantive change or feedback go on in the relationship. I'm just going to forgive you, and then we're going to bypass all that, right? So it can be used as a very common form of bypass. Okay, so one of the things that we recognize is that when we see subtlety of how we are interacting with people all the time, is that we are carrying with us constantly a much larger capacity than any capacity computer that you can have at the moment, in terms of the memory, in terms of that energy that can be stuck inside of us when we're interacting with a person, or even when we're not interacting with the person directly. Maybe it's somebody who just reminds you of that person who you did have a problem with in the past. And if we recognize that all of these lenses are constantly working in our memory system, it's really tying up our cognitive load. It's really tying up our emotional load. And when we're able to forgive, we are clearing that up. It's like closing computers and applications down on your computer in order to free up your CPU, right? It's like you're able to move things through. And
You reboot.
You're rebooting. And ultimately, to your question about karma, there are a lot of different. Karma is a Hindu concept that is about the idea of cause and effect, right? And it actually means action as a translation, and it talks about cause and effect. And we have a tendency to be like, oh, well, if you harm a dog in this life, the dog is going to come back and get you, or a dog is going to come back and get you in this life. And isn't that great cause and effect? And it's not nearly as clean as that a lot of the time, though sometimes if you have a bad writer in your life, that's as I say, you may experience that. But in general, the more that you can stop and slow down the process of cause and effect within your own subtle body, within your own subtle system, the more you don't have to kind of be subjected to a lot of these things, is the way that I found this. This is kind of a very metaphysical way of saying it, but I think it's we can say it's really great for being able to clear your cognitive load, your cognitive and emotional load. That's a very practical thing. On a deeper metaphysical level, you're not just clearing those boards, you're also clearing a lot of other things that are unseen and we don't understand yet scientifically.
Right. Yeah, that we carry. And, I said earlier that we are forgiving what we perceive someone intended toward us. One of the best ways to not have to forgive is to not feel offended. It's like Eleanor Roosevelt thing said, no one can insult you without your permission. The way I look at it is sometimes it's like a 5-year-old kicking you in the shin saying, I hate you. You don't take that seriously. And sometimes people act like 5-year-olds that are just pissy. And so if you don't get offended, you have nothing to forgive. That's number one. That's the best way of preventing the forgiveness. If you are now in a situation where you feel someone has truly done something to you, I already mentioned my father, that happened. He didn't do it to me, but as a result of his actions, it had a big effect on my life. And then I had to release that because I had it in me for so long to forgive him. And then when people actually do things, they're shitty. They just do stuff that just was not nice. And if you're working with them, that's one thing. If you're living with them, that's a whole nother thing, right? Because, forgiveness at home is another situation because, people may do things, your partners may do things to offend you. They may have said something and you're deeply hurt and you want to have some restitution around that. So there's different types of forgiveness for different types of relationships.
Absolutely. And I think too, when we look at the circumstances that we are forgiving people on, one of the things that that people may have heard of in kind of pop psychology is this idea, for instance, a trauma bond. A trauma bond, you can be trauma bonded to a person, which means that you guys have been through so much difficulty together. It feels impossible to kind of move you away from each other. It's like you just keep coming back. It's those people who are in relationships, they break up and then they keep coming back and then they keep coming back. There's that. But people can be trauma bonded to companies as well, right? And this experience of, it's going to be a layoff. Oh, it's not going to be a layoff. All these experiences, especially if you're operating at an employee level, like you're experiencing a fear of leaving because of the consequences of what it can mean for your survival. And do I have this other ability? But you may be willing to withstand a lot of abuse that's coming from the company. And not actually doing anything about it because of this trauma bond. And forgiveness is one of the best ways of being able to let go, right? That's ultimately what we're talking about. Forgiveness is a synonym for the practice of letting go in a very, very effective way.
Yeah, and the thing you and I were talking about earlier, Kristina, is that some cultures over the years have perfected this. And the best example is the Hawaiian culture, where they actually came up with the concept of Ho'oponopono, which is their cultural way of allowing an individual who has done some harm within the community to seek forgiveness and seek understanding what it is.
This episode is brought to you by Results Through Strategy. Since 2006, RTS has been the go-to partner for restaurants and food service brands, navigating growth, transformation, or recovery. Their team of seasoned industry veterans helps companies rediscover their purpose, realign with their values, and implement strategies that build measurable, sustainable performance.
And so you're the one that introduced that to me. Can you share a little bit of that with the audience? Because they may not have heard about it like I hadn't heard about it before.
Absolutely. So this was first conveyed in a book by Dr. Joe Vitale, but it's funny because it's kind of going back a couple of layers because, as Fred said, this is an ancient Hawaiian practice for reconciliation and forgiveness. And it was modernized by Dr. Hugh Lin. And this is the story. And again, it's like, this is the story that was told. We're gonna say this is the story as it is told. And it's been told over and over and over again. But it is pretty fantastic. So Dr. Hugh Lin was a doctor who was in charge of a ward of violent, criminally insane patients. And in order to be able, and this ward was extremely dangerous to the point where, it was back in the 1980s, people would sometimes walk with their backs against the wall in order to avoid being attacked by those who were inside the ward. And so in an effort to treat these patients in a very, very different way, he would take the portfolios with just the picture and like what they had done, right? He wasn't even in front of the patients at all.
Right.
And he would do a practice of Ho'oponopono, which is 4 steps, which is I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, and thank you. And we'll keep repeating that, but it's I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, thank you. And he did this to all of these folios, and in the process of he never saw them in person. All he was doing was to the folios directly. And over the course of 4 years, the patients who were previously violent and sedated became healthy. Their shackles were removed, and the ward was eventually closed because all of the patients were released and cured.
It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story.
It's an amazing story, right? It's one of those things where you just go, maybe it's a little bit too hard to believe, but what I always say is, what's the harm in believing it, right? Is there actual true harm in believing this and saying, actually, there are practices that we can do that can ultimately change things? You may not experience the same thing that Dr. Hugh Lin did. And it may be because you don't have the belief behind it, because as we know, belief is a very huge part of a lot of these practices, and like conviction of heart that you put into something. But what's the benefit of becoming skeptical to it and not allowing it into your life? There may be a benefit to that, but to me, I always say, why not?
Well, and the Hawaiian religion is the Huna religion, and that's where they have kahunas, who are their priests. And for centuries, they believed that energy is transmitted over long distances. I mean, you could pray for the death of an enemy and they would die. So this is not, voodoo. This was a practice they actually believed in because they were very much in touch with nature. And what I really loved when you first shared this with me, because it gave me something to hang on to be able, as I said, to release that energy that I had within. And you introduced that to me in the process of my healing from cancer. And it was a significant part of what I was able to do to recognize that I might have been hanging on to something that I needed to sort of flush out. And this is a great way of flushing it out, where you could visualize the person and just say this to them, thank you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you. And for the different people, it might have had different meanings, different emphasis on different parts of those 4 phrases. And you can say them in any order, whatever makes the most sense to you. It doesn't have to follow a rigid order, but it's whatever you feel within your heart. But when you say this with feeling, not just utter it like a mantra, but you say it with feeling, it's very, very transformative. And you can feel the release and feel the peace that comes as a result of it.
Absolutely. And I think if there was a practice that I could say, there are a lot of practices that I have within the work that I do, but consistently, the one that seems to be the best for someone when they are going through it, right? Because when you start to look at yourself, when you start to look at your stuff, you go through it, right? And it's a real testament to you're actually doing it. And Ho'oponopono is the way of moving through there, right? Because it's got all 4 components to it, which are so incredibly important. So the way that I say this is, I'm sorry is a recognition of the material of what it is that you're thinking of, right? It's like there's a radical acceptance in whatever it is.
We participate in everything. We're a participant. We're not a victim. We're a participant.
Exactly. And so if we say, okay, I'm sorry, I'm acknowledging that there's something that has entered my reality. I'm sorry. Like sometimes I'll even say, I'm sorry for letting this thing into my reality, right? But at the same time, it's like, I'm sorry. There's an acknowledgement that happens, and I'm sorry. Please forgive me is what I see as an asking of forgiveness and releasing that memory. It's saying, I'm asking for help, right? And that help is in the form of forgiveness, right? From whatever it is, whether it's an aspect of yourself, whether it's another person, whether it's a higher power, whether it's an event, whether it's anything. Thank you is an expression of gratitude, which is going to, as I say, gratitude is a lubricant of life. It's allowing you to move things out of your system. And that thank you really allows that to happen. And I love you. I mean, we withhold I love you a lot. And obviously we consider that I love you is not work appropriate or not this or that. But if you could think of a phrase that is held back and is revered in any language as much as I love you is, it's such a transmutative thing. It's basically turning that energy and turning it back to neutralize it, right? Because it's so incredibly powerful, and it's one of those things that for me as a young person growing up through difficulties, and I had a lot of weaponized I love yous, right? I had a lot of that growing up, right? I had a lot of like, oh, but I hurt you, but I love you. I hurt you, but I love you. And it just was like, and shouldn't you be okay with this? Like, shouldn't you be okay because I said I love you and because we're family? Aren't we supposed to forgive each other? And you're just like, no, that's not. That to me was something that I had to get over. I had to really like integrate back into my life to really kind of reappropriate, so to speak, what I love you meant, right? Because I learned it as weaponized, and then I weaponized it. I would use it as but everything's okay, and I'll just throw a bunch of I love yous your way, and maybe you won't be mad at me, or maybe you'll be nicer to me, or whatever it is. And then, you get those first love experiences, and isn't a big deal when you say I love you, and you can withhold it from another person. And everyone has a very, very centralized and personal view of what love is for them, right? Like, I mean, like, how do you know, Fred, that you feel love for somebody back like 20 years ago versus now, or 30 years ago versus now?
Oh, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. I mean, just what I've been through in the last few years. One, I say it a lot more often. And when I do, I'm looking at the person right in the eye and dear friends, and I love them. And it's not romantic love, but it is an acknowledgement of them as a unique human being that I see and I acknowledge and I care for. And I want them to know that they're important to me as much as they're important to themselves. That's where I've taken it from at a social level. And these are male friends and female friends. It's not just, just toward a woman. And then, of course, in my family and with my wife, then it has even a deeper expression of it, because it's almost like, do you remember Avatar, where they were like, you would connect your tails together, and the whole phrase was, I see you, I acknowledge you're here and present, I'm present with you. There's a little bit more of that goes on to it. And I'm guilty of at times being a little disconnected and not being present. So my wife reminds me. And, I have to, I got to get slap out of it, get back in focus and begin to acknowledge it. And I have found that if you just take the time to be more expressive of the positive aspects of the person you're interacting with and just thank them for that, that goes such a long way. Thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate the kindness that you show me, whatever that may be. And when you get it, it feels wonderful. So you can imagine how wonderful it feels for somebody else. And it's a lot easier for me. And I wasn't raised to be very expressive in that way. You just didn't do that. I was macho Mexican. And if anything, as I've learned and you and I've discussed, the more you let go of that control, the more agency you have in your own life. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to give someone a gift of holding a mirror up to them and saying, I see a really incredible human being in front of me, and I want you to see what I see through my expression of you. That's what you're doing when you're saying something like that, is a mirror to the person saying, this is what I see in you. It's pretty cool.
It is. So if we see that we are really doing, again, you can say it in any order, but I particularly love, I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, thank you. You're really doing a process here that is unlocking, and it's using words and phrases that are, again, steeped in religious, people have been telling us from every which way possible that these are incredibly important things to pull into your life and to incorporate into your life, right? And you put all four of them together, and holy cow, right? Like, it's a pretty potent thing. That's a pretty potent thing. So we're talking about this as a general thing, but let's pull it into a business and executive context, right, Fred?
Well, no executive is going to go around the office saying, I love you. I get that. And that's not what it's really saying, because you're doing this internally. You can do it to yourself, but we all have people that we are challenged by, and they're difficult, and they may put us on edge, or we may not be at our best. We're out of shape. And having a practice like this makes a difference. I mean, the reality is, at the end of the day, the forgiveness you're extending to somebody else ultimately is giving forgiveness to yourself. for believing that a person is bad or malintended or whatever judgment you have on them. And if you start releasing the forgiveness toward others' behavior toward you, really also releasing the forgiveness of yourself toward yourself. And one of the most difficult things I had to understand was self-love. I didn't get that when I first heard the term. And I remember reading once, well, you can't love anyone else more than you're capable of loving yourself. And I'm like, what the hell did that mean? Yep. I just did not understand. And I finally sort of figured out a little bit, saying, the more you love yourself, the bigger a space you create within your soul and your heart for others, because you're loving yourself, and then that the capacity to love is enhanced, so that now when you allow someone in, your ability to love them is so much deeper and has a lot more meaning. And this isn't about being soft about things. You're still going to have some tough conversations. We talked before about being nice versus being kind. And when you're kind is when you really care and love for someone else. When you're being nice, you're just loving yourself selfishly. That's not what we're trying to do. And we're trying to be thoughtful to other people. As leaders, we really want to influence someone else's behavior to perform at their best. That's the deal, right? I want you to perform the best you can, deeply committed, highly engaged, for the betterment of what we're here to do jointly as a business. That's the contract. And if you can have an environment where people feel that it's safe to go out on a limb, to take risks, to try new ideas, and if they make a mistake, that it is not judged on and pounced on, it's understood and forgiven, because it was not done with malintent. And these are the things that are difficult to learn. It just takes, wisdom comes around as a result of making a lot of mistakes and trying to sit and think about them. We always say, oh, you got to learn from your mistakes. Well, you first got to admit that it was a mistake before you can learn from it. And so try that one on first. Admit the mistake. That's not easy. It wasn't easy for me. You got to finally say, yeah, I blew it. I made a mistake. I made a bad call. I didn't intend that. And it came out the wrong way, or whatever the action was. And then that practice changes one's relationship with others and with oneself.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful way of saying it. And I think, we are talking in general, whether it's the last episode we were talking about this entire idea of not having introspection and that the best CEOs don't have introspection, or we're talking about this is like, there's a theme here, which is that you're going to become the best possible leader when you work on becoming the best possible version of yourself. There's very little ability to compartmentalize your being bent out of shape, you're doing, and be able to sustain that for health for a very long time. There's a lot of, I was talking with a client today about longevity practices and how kind of way far out there all of these longevity practices are, because people think that they can use just their minds to be able to figure out the science, to be able to hack whatever strange combination of cold plunge and red light that you can think of. Somebody's tried it to kind of move people forward. And as we look at longevity as a practice, I always say, what is the best practice of longevity that we can possibly look at? Or what is the best, to me, it's relaxation. All of the blue zones, which is all those things about those places where people live a long time, they're incorporating aspects of relaxation and peace within themselves as a daily practice. Forgiveness is one of the best ways to be able to truly relax, because it's how you can let go of as much as possible, which is effectively kind of like moving the lactic acid out of your muscles, or, moving the kind of stuck knots out of your body so that your body can truly relax. And we're seeing more and more how we have a culture that tries to compartmentalize what it means to be a CEO, different from being a leader. And we've had a lot of iterations of a lot of companies as they move through their death cycles, because, you try to live outside the kind of holism of a person and the holism of how we can show up as the best possible people.
Yeah, well, that's a practice as an executive. This 4 phrases of Ho'oponopono are done before a board meeting, before a crucial conversation, someone's, annual review, and that you're dreading because you think there's going to be some pushback. Those are the kind of circumstances. By doing this practice, you are releasing the tension, releasing the energy, and preparing yourself to do that. So I think this is one of those topics that is unusual to talk about in business. but is really essential in a successful leader to consider. And we hope that those of you who've been listening to us today can begin to appreciate the subtleties that are here and how powerful it really is.
Absolutely. So we're going to give you a business-friendly interpretation of this, if this helps, for those of you who are finding it difficult to imagine saying I love you to one of your coworkers. We all get there eventually, right, Fred? Hopefully.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
No. It's like I said, it's silently uttered. It doesn't have to be out loud.
Right. So here's the kind of basic tool set of how you could do this. So imagine that you are triggered by someone. You're replaying a conversation in your head. We've talked about this idea of rumination. We're just running through something in our head. Somebody said something to us and you're stuck on a past decision. You made a failure. You didn't fire people when you needed to. You didn't downsize when you needed to. Reduction in workforce, to be more appropriate, when you needed to, or you did something too soon, or you got rid of somebody, or you destroyed a relationship that was very necessary for the company. So the first step is to think about the situation, right? Is to really embody it emotion-wise and say, I'm going to think about this situation. And this may get my blood boiling, or this may be really difficult for me, but my job is to think about it and call it to mind. The second is to start running this sequence of I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, thank you. And here's a slight shift that you can do that's kind of the same effect. The I'm sorry acknowledges your participation in the dynamic. It could just say, I see my part in this. I'm sorry, I see my part in this. The please forgive me is releasing the grip of needing to be right. That's really, really key, right? Because what we recognize is that given enough perspective, things are going to be very different. Instead of saying, please forgive me, you could say, I'm releasing the need to be right, or I'm releasing the need to hold on to this. Next one, thank you, which extracts the lesson in a lot of ways. It's like you're really pulling out the lesson of what it is. Instead of saying thank you, you can say, there's something here I can use. I recognize that I've received something as a result of this interaction, and I'm grateful for what I've received from this interaction, even if it's an understanding of an action that I've been delaying for a very long time and now need to take. And I love you. I love you, again, is that stabilizing force, that really potent force. And it also reduces the threat response of the situation, because if you can say I love you to your enemy, like, wow, that's an incredibly potent tool. Instead of saying I love you, you could say, this doesn't threaten who I am, right? I'm not threatened by you. I'm so unthreatened by you that, I love you. I really want people to just say I love you to everybody. Isn't it true, Fred? And so that is a practice that I would encourage everyone to do. Think of that current friction point. Run the sequence once slowly. Notice if it shifts. Maybe give it a mark. Is it 1 to 10? Is it a 10? Are you that triggered by it? So you run it, and then you check it again when you're done. It's down to an 8. All right, I'm going to run it again. I'm going to run it again until you can get it down to a 1, 2, 3, even a 0. And because ultimately forgiveness is an ongoing practice, it is never a one and done.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you for that. I think this has been an interesting conversation, and I can't wait to hear some feedback from people when they try this to see if it has impact on them, as you just so well illustrated. So thanks for that, Kristina.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fred. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Goodbye.
The Executive and the Mystic podcast, co-hosted by Fred LeFranc and Kristina Wiltsee, where wisdom meets business.